YouTube, it's Multiplier here, sitting down in the chair. Oh, we bumped into the keyboard, sitting down in the chair, hopefully providing some form of narrative to the otherwise normal video where I tell you things. And in this video, it's basically me telling you things about Noisia and how they typically produce music. They have a different workflow to how most of you work. So why is it interesting? First of all, let me explain why I'm talking about it very quickly, of course. They have done a new In the Studio with Noisia video series thing with Future Music Magazine. They did one a few years ago, and that's on YouTube. I will link it below. But they've gone and done another one to promote their new album. So that's not actually on YouTube, but I bought the magazine, watched it. That was amazing. Anyway, why am I telling you this? Basically, I've been seeing into the minds and the workflows of Noisia, who are straight up the best guys in the industry when it comes to writing music, sound design, scoring for films, games, all that sort of stuff. These guys are the best, and yes, let me tell you how they typically work. So what most people do when it comes to making music, they open up a fresh project and they'll start writing a track. So they'll start making presets, layering down drums, all the different parts, arranging. They'll basically just use that project to try and create a track, try and create some form of song, track, tune, whatever you want to call it. But crucially, they do it all within projects. So at the end of a production session, they may have one project, two projects, three projects, four projects, all with different ideas at different stages. But each of those projects is a discrete track. They may be working on an album, but fundamentally, each of these projects is a discrete track. It's a discrete thing. However, that's not what Noisia do. What Noisia do is they separate the sound design process from the songwriting process, which is two totally different things. And most people tend to do them a bit together. What Noisia do is completely separate them. Let me give you an example. So what they normally do is instead of, say, opening up a blank project and just trying to write a track, what they'll do is they'll spend half an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours just working on drums. Now those drums may be there may be one bit of drums, or there may be multiple different variations, or they may do different patterns, but fundamentally they're just working on drums for 2 hours. And then what they'll do throughout that 2 hours is save, either in the form of presets or by bouncing out to audio, loads of different versions of those drums. So if you take a look at the end of a session with Noisia, what you're going to see is a whole bunch of different folders organized carefully, of course. You're going to see a whole bunch of different folders, and each of those folders is going to have lots of different ideas. There may be a bass sound and then a twisted version of that bass sound, and then that same bass sound heavily distorted, and then a slightly different bass sound, and then a slightly longer version of that different bass sound, and then a heavily phased version of that second bass sound, and so on. So they're creating lots and lots of ideas. It's almost like they're creating sample packs instead of creating tracks. And this is really cool because then what you can do, say a week later or a day later or a month or even a year later, you can come back to that folder, come back to all those ideas, quickly listen through them all with fresh ears, of course. So you're quickly listening to ideas, and you can very quickly figure out which ideas are good, which ideas are bad, and of course, which ideas might work together. So then you can very easily create an entire track from those existing elements, just like you do from a sample pack. But of course, you made the sample pack and I just got an email. Emails aside though, that is the general idea. Instead of always creating discrete tracks, what you want to try and do is create lots of sounds, lots of ideas that you can then piece together at a later date, almost like a jigsaw. I remember Noisia saying in at least one of the videos, if you look at their final finished projects, they're actually quite simple. There's only 8, 12, 14 different layers, so it may look incredibly simple, like they haven't done much. But if you actually look at all those different layers, an awful lot went into those layers beforehand. In fact, Pendulum said a similar thing in the Pendulum video they did years and years and years ago. I mean, take the drums, say. The drums in the final project may only be 4 layers, kick, snare, percussion, or that's 3 layers. Maths. There may only be even 1 layer for drums. They may have consolidated all the drums into one channel and then used that in the final project. So in the final project, it looks quite simple. It looks like you've just used a loop from a sample pack. But in reality, you made that loop a week ago or a month ago or a year ago from individual parts. Maybe even you made the drum sounds too, and then in a separate project, turned all those drum sounds into a drum loop. It is pretty much like making your own sample packs and then using those sample packs to create your own tracks. So what I recommend doing is giving this a go. Think of some organizational strategy that makes sense for you. I think in the case of Noisia, they tend to do it mostly by time and session more than genre and type of sound, but maybe for you it makes more sense to do it by genre type. So you have aggressive dubstep sounds in one folder and then chill dubstep sounds in another folder and so on. or maybe do it by element type, as I say. So it could be kicks in one folder, snares in another, drum loops in another, and then maybe sound effects in another, bass and so on. So whatever makes sense. Instead of approaching the session with the mindset, let's make a track, instead approach the session with the mindset, let's make some cool elements, let's make some cool sounds. And it could be maybe a bass line or an idea, it could even be a chord progression, whatever makes sense. So approach that session with a mindset to create elements, save all those elements in a logical way. It could be presets, it could be MIDI, it could be loops, whatever. And then at the end of those 6 production sessions, what you'll have is this huge library of material that's all yours that you can then put together at a later date. As I say, it's exactly like making a sample pack. At the end of these 6 production sessions, you'll have folders and folders of presets, loops, MIDI, ideas, all ready to go in a folder on your computer. And then what you can do when your ears are fresh in, say, 2 days' time, a week's time, whatever, is you can try and piece together some of those ideas. Now, 90 to 95% of those ideas probably won't work, and that's perfectly cool. But the cool thing is that 5% will be amazing, and you can literally put together a track in an hour or 2 hours max once you have all those individual elements all lined up in some form of organized way on your computer. Cool stuff, right? That is it. That is the Noisia production workflow tip with multiplier there, multiplier. I wish I could fly, but I can't. I am a land mammal. And that is it, people. That is the end of the video. I will catch you on the flippity flip.